welcome you in for our third and final hour of America's Forum on this Wednesday, along with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth on the anchor desk, and from Newsmax, Washington, we're pleased that Ford O'Connell is joining us as well. Some very sad news to pass along. Miranda, you mentioned it at the outset of your Newsmax Now update. 7 Marines, 4 soldiers presumed dead this morning following a helicopter crash there off the Florida Panhandle.
Yeah, according to reports, they crashed in an Army helicopter. This happened during a night training exercise. The Marines were a part of a special operations group based at Camp Lejeune. It's still unknown what actually contributed to that crash. And again, this is still, they keep cautioning everyone, a rescue mission as of right now. Search
and rescue, and it points out the peril involved even in training. For more on the story, we're joined by David Rutherford here on the anchor desk. He's a Navy SEAL motivational speaker, behavioral training expert, and David is also the author of this book, Naval SEAL Training, Self-Confidence, Frog Logic Field Manual for Adults. So, David, before we get to the book, another grim reminder of what can happen in training.
It's really part of the job. When you sign up in the special operations world, every day is a day you could die. And so you do it willingly, and you do it because you're with your guys, and it's just part of it. And unfortunately, these tragic accidents happen, and I just hope that the families, our prayers are with them.
David, with the American public so disconnected from the American military today versus in other generations, how do America's armed services, their men and women, stay focused and keep that true belief that they're doing the right thing and pushing freedom forward?
Well, you don't even think about it in terms of having to muster up the courage. Sometimes morale can get knocked down based on certain things that might be happening in politics or around the world. But every day you know you have a job to do, and that's what you do. You get the job done no matter what.
Let me ask you the basic question from your book. What is frog logic?
Well, that's a really good question.
So frog logic is Navy SEAL motivational training. And it's based on my 20 years of personal experience trying to understand what about the human condition enables us to succeed in every environment imaginable. And I've taken my experiences as a SEAL, as a trainer, as a medic, as an international training specialist, all these things, and I've created this program to help people find whatever it takes to get that fire burning inside their gut. So that's frog logic and thinking like a frogman, right?
What inspired you to do that?
So on my second trip to Afghanistan, working for a large private security company, I had done an operation, and in this village there was like 30 kids, and these were the most destitute children you've ever seen. I mean, Afghan children have nothing. And so I saw them, and in that moment I was called to action, to change my life, to have a new mission, and to create something that would help children endure the combat of life, so to speak. That's how Frog Logic was born.
A couple of minutes remain in this segment, David, and I'm interested. You come out here, you're an enthusiastic guy with a great big smile. When you're coaching or teaching guys going through special forces training, give me that command look. What kind of teacher look do you have?
He's all smiles right now.
You know, because this is a tough business. Give us that look to the camera.
Okay,
What is a command look?
That's unsat.
And that's cleaned up for family programming.
Amen,
which we appreciate. But what about the transition from going through it to becoming a trainer and coach?
It's the greatest honor that you can have. As you move through the training, you look up to your instructors with such reverence, with such just profound respect. And then when that opportunity is afforded to you, it really changes who you are, your whole perspective, because the lineage of our 70-plus year unit is in your hands to pass down. That's a big responsibility.
You seem so upbeat, all full of smiles. And, sadly, every day we hear about the suicide rate among our military forces. How disturbing is that to you? You must see it. You
It's
must see it.
horrific. It is the worst reality that we're facing right now. Unfortunately, it is the reality of combat. It is the reality of war. It's part of it. The problem is, yes, we've had there was an article in the New York Times recently that there's a slight dip in the 22 number, right? But the reality is, it's not just, that's active duty, that's people that are still serving. There's a tremendous problem going with veterans that have gotten out, that no longer have the identity of the special operations or even the regular forces. That's another huge problem that is also escaping us.
Well, we want to continue talking to you more about this subject and other subjects going on in our news.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is worth asking what happens to warriors once they come home, leave Special Forces, and a curious story we're hearing about a lot of veterans back home who decide to go back and get in the fight, either with private contractors or I guess what we called mercenaries. You see, there's a lot more to talk about with David, and we'll do so along with Ford too as we continue on America's Forum.
I have no quarrels with the religion of Islam. My problem with ISIS is they're not people. You know, the things they're doing are horrible.
That is the voice of Patrick Maxwell talking to the New York Times. I guess we'd call Patrick a Marine turned mercenary. He went back to Iraq to fight against ISIS. We're continuing now on America's Forum with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, Ford O'Connell at Newsmax, Washington. And here on our desk, we continue our conversation with David Rutherford, Navy SEAL, motivational speaker, behavioral training expert, and all those things on your resume.
He's a very, very, very busy man.
I just got to ask, you were talking earlier about doing some private contracting in Afghanistan, and I don't know if you put what, I don't know enough about what Patrick Maxwell is doing in the fight against ISIS, but people returning to the war zone either as private contractors doing service work or teaching or taking up arms in combat. Are we seeing more of that now among veterans of the conflict?
I don't think so. I think this is a few cases where guys have felt compelled to go back because they're not really sure what their identity is here at home, and so they want to get back in the fight. There is a sense where we lost a lot of ground gained. I was just with a bunch of friends this past weekend in Texas that were in the second battle of Ramadi, and they're upset about what we've lost. But these guys are not mercenaries. They're not getting paid to fight for the Peshmerga. They're just guys that are frustrated and want to go over and fight. Is it a good idea? No, not in my opinion.
I want to go back
David, this is a pretty remarkable story still. Who coordinates and funds these operations? Because you're saying that there's just a certain number of people and they're not getting paid. Somebody's got to be paying them somewhere.
Well, it's not that they're not getting paid. I mean, they're getting food, they're getting munitions, they're getting arms. A lot of these guys are bringing their own kit over with them that they had from when they served, because many guys bought their own stuff during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. But it's not like they're getting, $500 a day to fight these guys. They're doing it on their own accord. So you can't call them mercenaries. I don't think they absolutely don't fit within private contracting. They're people that really are frustrated and want to see something done on the front lines with ISIS.
How do you feel about ISIS? Are you frustrated about what's going on?
Beyond frustrated. This is one of the most difficult things that I've seen. I've lost over 65 teammates in combat over the last 14 years. There's been a total of almost 88 team guys that have died in training, suicides, all this. And it's a really troubling issue that we gained so much ground, we made so many sacrifices, but yet all of a sudden we're losing the momentum against this radical fascist ideology. I mean, it's horrible.
What should we be doing then?
That's a tough question.
Because right now, as we're talking, John Kerry right now is meeting with Congress.
It's a big
talking
deal.
about ISIS.
And wanting more power, right?
Right.
What you have to always do when you look about geostrategic planning when it comes to the military is you have to take the 40,000-foot approach first, right? You've got so many players. You've got Iran and the Republican Guard playing. You've got Syria playing. You've got Russia playing. You've got the Saudis playing. You've got us playing. You've got Israel playing. I mean, this is the worst possible Pandora's box that you can imagine. So you have to understand that making strategic decisions has ramifications far bigger than just going and dropping a few bombs.
And David, to pick up on that, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we can take a live look at what's happening now before the Armed Services Committee, or perhaps the Foreign Relations Committee, I should say, as Defense Secretary Ashton Carter is there testifying, and of course the Secretary of State John Kerry there as well, all to try and gain congressional authorization for yet another use of force resolution, this one toward ISIS. Now, you're used to saluting and taking orders.
Yes, sir.
But as a citizen as well, now stepping back, what do you believe our course of action should be?
That's a difficult question. A lot of these decisions are way above my pay grade. What I care about is that whatever decisions are made, they get behind the full force of our capabilities. You know, many of my friends are still on the front lines at the highest possible places you can operate. And I just want them to be supported how they need to be supported. I want to have the backing of the government behind them. I want to have the support through the VA for when they come home and they have to deal with 17 concussions or all the other, you know, traumas of going into warfare. I want that service provided so they can focus on doing the job they're being asked to do.
And mindful of that, there are so many topics we want to get to. One of those we promised earlier about what Special Forces warriors do when it's time to make that decision to get back into private life or civilian life. The other thing is something coming off here that has great import to the Navy SEALs family and those who support them, and we're going to talk more about that. Ford O'Connell, and yes, and of course, VA treatment, so many other topics. We are going to continue our conversation with David Rutherford. Ford O'Connell will chime in again from Newsmax, Washington, and we'll all be back to continue the conversation about what is very important as our Secretary of Defense and our Secretary of State testify in front of that Senate committee. We get the firsthand testimony of a guy who's literally been through the wars, David Rutherford, and we'll be back with more on America's Forum.
All we want from the VA to do is to be able to fix what's broken, to hold employees appropriately accountable, and to help restore the faith of veterans in their VA healthcare system. And this one employee, this one supervisor, she violated all three of those.
That is Joe Davis, the Director of Public Affairs of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, discussing the new fallout surrounding the Veterans Administration after an employee sent out a controversial email.
In the email, the employee is mocking mental health problems like suicide, which plagues vets. It also contains pictures of a Christmas elf pleading for medication and hanging itself, if you can imagine this, from an electrical cord. The employee is currently on administrative leave.
And it sounds as if she took leave of her senses right there.
Yes.
But let's continue our conversation with David Rutherford, Navy SEAL, motivational speaker, behavioral training expert, and author. And as is the case, we're pleased to also be joined by Ford O'Connell from Newsmax, Washington. We've touched on this a little bit, David. The VA health care in the news, then a new congressional fix, and there seems to be a delay between what the legislation intended and what's really happening at the medical centers.
There's a serious problem, and this is a systemic problem that has developed because of the magnitude of this bureaucracy, right? I have a friend, Jeff Enderlin, who drank himself to death as a result of not being able to find the adequate treatment he needed from his 20 plus years of service in the SEAL team. I have other friends that are out that are struggling right now with alcohol, opiate addiction, all these things, and they're just not finding the right solutions. The VA is struggling, and what's happening is these guys are literally tired of treading water and they're drowning.
David, what would you like to see changed about the VA in particular? I don't think a lot of our viewers know how the VA works. So what would be the biggest change for you over there?
The number one thing I believe that needs to happen is they have to expand what TRICARE allows people to what type of coverage. So, you know, allowing people to go get hyperbaric treatment to treat to treat TBI, allowing guys to go down to the Carrick Brain Clinic in Texas in order to get the most advanced type of treatment for traumatic brain injury, allowing them to go find psychiatrists that aren't in the system or are off base, so they don't have that stigmatism attached to not being combat ready. There's a whole slew of things, but the primary one is open up TRICARE so people can get outside better care than the VA is capable of providing.
As you heard us say earlier, we were talking about that email. We've all read reports that say that more soldiers are likely to die of suicide than in actual combat. So hearing about this email, what is your reaction?
It's disgusting. And what I'm tired of is, oh, we're going to review, they're going to go through the process. And what's happened is government employees become so protected by rules and regulations that the ability to get rid of people that are fundamentally problematic to their core, to the advancement of any true help, they just can't get rid of them. In our world, if we have an 80% dropout rate, because when a person doesn't rise to the occasion and can't perform at the level they need to perform at, boom, they're gone. They either drop on request or we get rid of them. That needs to be the standard at the VA.
David, we've talked about the tough times that some vets have to readjusting to life once the service is done. What is the biggest obstacle that many of them face? I mean, what's the number one thing they have difficulty overcoming?
So for me personally, the biggest thing was not being there, not being around the camaraderie, not being for the guys. And it took me about 5 or 6 years to adjust. And thankfully, I was able to find a passion in my motivational speaking business now. But most guys, they lose touch of that sense of purpose, right? We all need purpose in life to drive us forward towards success. If you don't have purpose, then what are you going to do? So being able to find these guys that have these unique skill sets and applying them in a job where they feel that sense of camaraderie, feel that sense of purpose is very challenging. And also, we struggle enormously with trying to realize that we can't make civilian people conform to our mindset. We have to learn how to conform to theirs.
And mindful of that, we just saw a little earlier, and maybe in the control room they can get this, we had a screen grab from our parent website, Newsmax.com, I believe, showing a military officer, someone who was in command, who really came forward about family issues, about contemplating suicide, and saying, look, here's transparency in our own private situation. Is that needed out of command officers?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that has to happen. And this was the general of SOCOM, as also, Captain Doolittle, who went through training around the same period as I did. He's come out and supported it. The problem is, as an operator, I can't go to somebody that's a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist and feel like they have any clue what I'm talking about when it comes to combat. So what needs to happen is there has to be a gateway process. Get people involved, get them opening up and getting them talking. And that's why I work with a bunch of different charities that are providing that gateway service, right? To get guys to loosen up, to say, hey, listen, I'm not combat ineffective because I'm dealing with some things. I'm stronger to go out and do it. And thankfully, these guys are starting to say that.
You mentioned another key word, charities, and we should point out, David, that you are here for a very important reason. David appears with us today on behalf of the Navy SEAL Foundation and the Navy SEAL Museum on the biannual Navy SEAL Evening of Tribute at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida on March 30th at 5:45 p.m. The event raises money for a very worthy cause. So just a few weeks from now in Palm Beach, the Mar-a-Lago Club. If you can't get to Palm Beach, you can still help the Navy SEAL Foundation and the Navy SEAL Museum by visiting the website. It's all like one word, NavySealMuseum.org. So we want you to remember that. The name of David's book again, we want to get that out to you, Navy SEAL Training, Self-Confidence, Frog Logic Field Manual for Adults. Again, David, in the minute remaining, give me 30 seconds, the ultimate example of frog logic.
All right, here
Wow.
we go. The ultimate example of frog logic is you have 4 concepts that you have to focus on. You have to forge your self-confidence, you have to live a team life, you have to embrace your fears, and live with purpose. If you do that, if you focus deep down, you can light that fire in your gut that can help you overcome the combat of life and learn to defeat the negative insurgency every single day of your life. How's
David,
that?
All right.
that's
Wow,
good.
that was good. I
I
feel
can
like
just
an-
see all the meeting planners out there going, okay, I think I've found my next motivational speaker.
Awesome.
But with all sincerity,
TeamFrogLogic.com.
there we go. And David Rutherford, we do appreciate your time, and we hope you'll be able to join us again from time to time to talk about national security issues and to talk about personal decisions that so many of our returning vets have to face. Thanks so much for your time. We're going to step aside now for a Newsmax Now update.